Welcome to Blackbriar Gaming. Today, we'll be looking at the Legiones Astartes Unaligned Rites of War. That is, those generic Rites of War that you can find in the Legiones Astartes Army Books. Over 3 separate videos, we'll be looking at all 9 Rites of War, analysing them against 3 key metrics: fun, lore, and power. Fun is pretty self-explanatory, and obviously the most subjective, but I'll rate it on how fun I think this Rite of War will be to bring to the table. The lore category will judge how well the Rite of War enables players to design narrative-driven armies, and finally, power will assess how strong an army using this Rite of War could be on the table. I'm also keen to look at which legions do well selecting each Rite of War. This is part 1 of 3 for this series. This video will look at the Legion Recon Company, Angel's Wrath, and Sky Hunter Phalanx Rites of War. Just a quick note before we get into it: a subscribe and a like really helps us reach a bigger audience. So if you enjoy the video, please hit those buttons down below. We've also recently affiliated with War Office Game Supplies. So if you live in the UK and you're looking to buy some Heresy or other Games Workshop miniatures online, check out our affiliate link in the description for some great savings and a chance to help out the channel. Firstly, quick note on unlocking Rites of War. You need to either have access to the Master of the Legion special rule, usually through a Primarch, special character, Praetor, or Centurion with the Delegatus Console upgrade, or the Rite of War allows you to upgrade a specific model or unit to have the Master of the Legion special rule. Without that, you cannot select a Rite of War. Okay, with that out of the way, let's look at our first Rite of War. It is the Legion Recon Company. So, it reads, let's have a look here. The effects: Legion Reconnaissance Squads and Legion Scout Squads in a detachment using this Rite of War do not have the Support Squad special rule. Legion Seeker Squads may be taken as non-compulsory troops choices in a detachment using this Rite of War. And a player whose army includes at least 1 detachment using this Rite of War may reroll any dice they roll to see which player takes the first turn or when attempting to seize the initiative. That's pretty good, both of those things. Okay, so limitation: no unit in a detachment using this Rite of War that includes any models with the heavy subtype may be deployed onto the battlefield during deployment and must instead be placed into reserve. A detachment using this Rite of War may not select any fortification choices, and all compulsory troops choices in a detachment using this Rite of War must be Legion Reconnaissance Squads or Legion Scout Squads. Alrighty, fun. This army can be an absolute blast to play. So you've got these deployment shenanigans to start with. You've got Infiltrate and Scout on a bunch of these units, which means you can get anywhere you want to on the table, you can get really close to the enemy, you can move away from them if you want to, essentially just do what you want. Infiltrate also provides the outflank ability when coming in from reserve, so keep that in mind too. It's got some great defensive tricks. My favorite is Shroud Bombs, and just combined with Alpha Legion, it gets nuts. So Shroud Bombs essentially reduce the range of enemy weapons by 6 inches when they're shooting at you, which is just really powerful when a lot of the weapons we're seeing at the moment is bolters, and those 18-inch bolters on a bunch of those legions as well. So Shroud Bombs, great. It goes to 8 inches with Alpha Legion, so nice. You've got a bunch of long range and short range firepower here. You can kit out a bunch of these units, that being Recon Squads, Scout Squads, and Seeker Squads, which are going to form the mainstay of this army. You can kit them out to do a bunch of different things. You can chuck Nemesis bolter rifles on them for that long range sniper action, which is really powerful. We'll get onto that more later. Or you can go for that short range firepower as well. A bunch of combi weapons on those Seekers, for instance, can get really tasty. So there's some great offensive output with large scale access to precision shots here. Precision shots, I think, are going to be super powerful in this edition. The ability to remove characters, to remove buffing units like those apothecaries, for instance, to take out sergeants who are packing those powerful close combat weapons in a lot of squads. Really good. Precision is awesome. It also lets you take away the units models you want to take away as well, to stop enemy doing funky things with removing models and reducing your effectiveness from other shooting, etc. Or stopping you from assaulting, that kind of stuff. As I said, the Nemesis bolter rifle is probably one of the best weapons in 2nd edition at the moment. It's got that sniper special rule, and then you've got the Seeker's Kraken bolters as well with that breaching. So Lots of fun on the table. You get to do lots of things here, from deployment shenanigans, great defensive, great offensive output, and it's just cool to be sneaky sometimes. So from a lore perspective, you can really dive into the narrative with this Rite of War. A super sneaky force providing recon for the rest of the Legion is pretty common in all the Legions, really. So you can do any Legion with this, is what I'm saying. Recon and Seeker squads can be kitted out for either long-range firepower, or they can fight up close and brutal too. Let's say you've got a World Eaters Legion, they love to get up close. You can still do up-close reconnaissance. It just means you're chopping things with chainswords a bit more than you are shooting them with sniper rifles. So every Legion can make its characterful aspect of war felt through this Rite of War. There's so much you can do with this force on the tabletop, with conversions and some really interesting camouflage-style paint schemes to give it that recon flair. I know in particular for my Alpha Legion, I'm looking at the Ash Nomad or Ash Waste Nomads from Necromunda, and I somehow want to use those as a bit of a scout unit to represent either human auxiliaries or just the Alpha Legion dressing up as weird locals and doing weird scouting shenanigans. So you can get really creative on what models you use, how you convert them up, and what this force looks like on the table. Alright, power. This can be a very powerful force in the battlefield. I've mentioned a few things already around those weapons and precision shots, etc. You've got line troops in the form of reconnaissance squads that can be taken in your compulsory troop slots. You've got cheap scout squads that can also fill that troop tax, but they don't come with line. So having that line keyword on reconnaissance and not having them as support anymore is really good for holding objectives both in your backline and then getting up close and personal as well. You've got access to Seeker squads as troops. I think Seeker squads are absolutely fantastic. And all three of these units, that being Recon squads, Scout squads, and Seeker squads, they're all really flexible and they do serious work against a diverse range of opponents depending on how you kit them out on the table. In particular, broad access to precision shots, which I mentioned before, will be really strong against certain armies, and you will always be able to take advantage of that. So which Legion does this best? From a power perspective, Raven Guard with their wide-ranging infiltration to support units you already want to be taking is really good. So these units are infiltrating up there, so Raven Guard allows you to give that to a bunch of other infantry units, specifically not with the heavy type there, noting you can't do that with the Rite of War anyway, and it lets you infiltrate those units up with them so that almost your entire army can just be starting in the face of your opponent. Let's see, Night Lords with their night fighting shenanigans, really good here. It allows you to shoot from further away without being shot back at in those first couple of turns, which is really nice. And Alpha Legion with their range superiority that I mentioned before. So that extra 2 inches there is not always huge, but when you add it to all those shroud bombs that you're flinging all over the place, now you're looking at 8 inches that the opponent has to add to their weapon range to get to you. So all of these, Night Lords, Raven Guard, Alpha Legion, they're super into this Rite of War. There's more though from both a power and lore perspective. These are great, but really any Legion can get into this recon action. So you're not trapped into just the sneaky ones. Imperial Fist, great example. They get an absolutely gross bonus to this Rite of War for those squads with bolt or auto weapons, which is mostly what these have, and that don't already have BS5. I'm pretty sure Seeker squads have BS5 already, so they're not getting as much advantage out of this as maybe your recon squads are, that essentially are going to BS5 if they're shooting bolt or auto weapons. Who else? Thousand Suns. Thousand Suns with access to the Athenian or Athenaean? Sure. Arcana upgrade. They enjoy this Rite of War for a bonus to pinning. So all those sniper rifles you could have with your Nemesis bolter rifles. Is that the right name there? I think so. Yeah. So that gives them a -1 to the enemy's leadership when doing pinning checks. So you could just be pinning units all over the place. It's going to be an absolute pain. So there's lots of different approaches to this Rite of War from a lore and from a power perspective. So that is the Legion Recon Company. I think this will be the most popular Rite of War that I will speak about today, and definitely one of the more popular generic Rites of War that we'll see. I think we'll see it a lot because these units are good. Next up, the Angel's Wrath Rite of War. Let's see. So the effects. Any unit in a detachment using this Rite of War eligible to take a Legion Rhino transport as a dedicated transport may instead take a Legion Storm Eagle gunship as a dedicated transport. Right, so this is a bit of an issue. Essentially, only units that take 10 or less models are able to take a Rhino as per the rules written. At least that's certainly the case for tactical squads, for instance. But a Storm Eagle has a troop capacity of 22. So you can take a regular 20 Marine unit in it. Not according to this effect here. Here's how I'd play it. Essentially, if I had a mate who wanted to use this Rite of War, I would say, you know what? You grab your 20-man tactical squad and you chuck it in that Storm Eagle and you feel great about it. Note that, as the rules are written, they can't technically do that. So just keep that in mind. Have a conversation about using this Rite of War with your opponent beforehand, and I'm sure they won't mind. Now, the next effect there, for any models with the vehicle unit type and both the flyer and transport subtypes from a detachment that is using this Rite of War and that is in reserve, the controlling player may choose to automatically have them enter play at the start of their first turn without making a reserves roll. If they are not brought onto play on turn 1, then reserve rolls are made for the models normally from turn 2 onwards. Very nice. Right. So, limitations. There's lots. So, all models with the infantry unit type and a detachment using this Rite of War that do not have jump packs must begin the battle embarked upon a model with the vehicle unit type and both the flyer and transport subtypes. Makes sense? So, your tactical squads, your sport squads, whatever, they have to be in flyers and they have to be off the table. All models with both the infantry unit type and a jump pack of any kind must begin in reserves, but may be assigned to a deep strike assault, so your assault squads and any specialist legion unit, destroyer squads, anything with the jump pack, they're starting in reserves and they're coming down deep strike assault, if you want. And a detachment using this Rite of War may not include any models with the vehicle type that is not a flyer, so no tanks, just flyers. Lastly, no fortification. Sure. Rating it for fun. A whole bunch of aircraft on the table is always going to look so good. I've always had a thing about kind of an airborne army, and this would be a great way to do it. I think this army is going to be very unique in the way it plays, and also to play against it as well, just adding something seriously different to the game. Depending on how you build it, though, and the mission, unique could very well end up meaning frustrating for both you and your opponent. So, if you're building to its intent, you're putting units in Storm Eagles, you've got Assault Marines and other jump pack equipped units deep striking down, supported by other aircraft, I think it's going to be fun for everyone. If someone were to look at kind of min-maxing this Rite of War with a just aircraft or whatever that looks like, I think it could be a bit frustrating. So just keep that in mind and make sure you're thinking about your opponent's fun when building this army as well as yours. It will not, however, be fun to build. As all Heresy aircraft are still chunky resin kits and there's no plastic Assault Marines, I would not touch this Rite of War with a 10-foot pole. Now, if a plastic Storm Eagle / Fire Raptor kit comes out and a plastic Assault Marine kit comes out, then I'm definitely looking at this one, and I think it could be lots of fun and look amazing on the table. If you're a braver and more cashed up hobbyist than I am, certainly don't let my hesitation hold you back. It's a really cool Rite of War. Lore. So the narrative for this Rite of War can be a lot of fun and suits a bunch of different legions. From a lore perspective, Raven Guard are the obvious choice here, but Night Lords, White Scars, Blood Angels, Dark Angels, the list goes on. Plenty of legions, super into aircraft. I mean, all legions have lots of aircraft sitting around, right? And there's going to be certain missions where it's just the obvious choice to go in with all you guys packed into flyers. Salamanders and Death Guard, on the other hand, might want to give this one a pass from a narrative perspective, but you could definitely get away with it if you wanted to. As I said, everyone has flyer transports. It's how you get from space to the planet that you're attacking, along with drop pods, of course. Now, while these legions certainly have their own collection of aircraft, mass jump pack themed assaults aren't really what the Salamanders and Death Guard are about, which is why I'd probably steer away from this Rite of War for them. If I were building this army, I'd theme it towards a loyalist element from a traitor legion, isolated and conducting cool hit-and-run attacks behind Horus's advance. I think you could have a lot of fun with that. It'd be a really ragtag kind of force, lots of injuries, lots of battle damage, their aircraft barely holding together, and just causing mayhem and guerrilla hit-and-run action. Now, from a power perspective, I think the power of this Rite of War comes down to how you build the army and the mission that you're playing. I guess I could make that statement about every single Rite of War, but it is what it is. While I don't think the damage output of the majority of the Legion flyers is anything to write home about, especially when considering their exorbitant points costs, the innate defensive boost they get from being flyers is fantastic. We're talking about snap shooting here, people. So You have to, all enemy forces that don't have the Sky Fire special rule, there we go, or some other weird special rule, are doing snap shooting at your vehicles, which means they're only hitting on 6s. And with a whole lot of ballistic skill 5 now kicking around for Legion units, that's a really big defensive boost. Saying that, the Xiphon Interceptor packs a serious punch for a relatively low points cost when it comes to weapons. And with a Ramjet diffraction grid, it's going to be surprisingly survivable, even against weapons with Skyfire. Now for Storm Eagles, being able to drop troops anywhere on the table in later terms of the game may sound fantastic, but the risk you're taking by having Marines ride around in zooming flyers is not insignificant. Due to this, I think a lot of the objective capturing power in this list will come from your assault squads. 20 strong assault squads deep striking into your opponent's lines, backed up by apothecaries and maybe some meat grinder characters, is going to be an absolute nightmare to deal with. So you could put a few little squads on those Storm Eagles, but I certainly wouldn't put anything expensive or anything you can't afford to lose in there, because when that flyer crashes, and it will crash, those guys are all taking some serious hits. So which Legion do I think does this best? Night Lords are once again at the top of the list for this Rite of War. Their fear mechanic works beautifully with deep striking and the potential to pin your opponents. Shutting down their reactions is so important when deep striking, and Night Lords just do it quite nicely. Blood Angels do that quite nicely as well. I'm pretty sure they've got a Warlord trait or something. It's an upgrade maybe that gives that -1 to leadership when deep striking and all the pinning tests that an opponent has to take when within 6 inches of your deep striking units. So Blood Angels are definitely on the list here. They get that bonus to charge as well, which is really good for your deep striking assault squads. Same on that thought process. Emperor's Children are going to be really nice here when going down the assault squad route. You want them to be getting the charge off when you're deep striking in. It's highly likely they will. So that +1 to initiative that the Emperor's Children get is probably better than the strength bonus that the Blood Angels are getting. Now, the Blood Angels and Night Lords also have some fantastic Legion-specific troops with jump packs that can be used with this Rite of War, as do the Raven Guard, so keep that in mind. Iron Hands get that it will not die 6+ on their vehicles, including their flyers, so that might make them a little bit tougher, but certainly nothing to write home about there. If you're going to focus on the infantry with jump packs piece of this Rite of War, the Sons of Horus are actually worth looking at. With their bonuses in combat, that is the -1 strength that your opponent's getting when fighting you in combat after charging or being charged, and also the ability to give jump packs to their Reaver squads, which just came out in the Legacies document as well. So lots of Legions really like this Rite of War. Next up is the Sky Hunter Phalanx Rite of War. Let's have a look at that one. I will turn the page of my rulebook here. Here we go. So, the effects. Legion Sky Hunter Squadrons and Legion Proteus Landspeeder Squadrons may be taken as troop choices in this detachment. And then Legion Sky Hunter Squadrons selected as troop choices get the line subtype. Very nice. Limitations. Models with the vehicle unit type in this detachment must have either Flyer, Fast, or Skimmer subtype. All units in this detachment, composed of models with the infantry unit type, must begin the battle embarked on a flyer. A detachment using this Rite of War may not include any models with the Dreadnought unit type. That hurts. Love me my Dreadnoughts. An allied detachment may not use this Rite of War, and a detachment using this Rite of War may not select any fortification choices. Why do they hate fortifications? Right, so here we go. Sky Hunter Phalanx Rite of War. The fun side of it. On paper, this Rite of War looks like a lot of fun. You've got a whole bunch of jet bikes, a whole bunch of land speeders, you're racing across the battlefield, blasting your opponents, plowing into combat. Actually, in practice, it sounds like a lot of fun too. As long as you don't want to win too many games, and we'll get into that soon. The miniatures for this Rite of War and for this army build, that being the jet bikes, that being the land speeders, they're just fantastic, and they're super iconic for the Heresy, so that definitely adds to my fun value as well. Essentially, if you want to run a bunch of jet bikes and you don't want to run White Scars, this Rite of War is for you. And this is another one of those Rites of War that really wants some more plastic units to come out though, specifically the jet bikes. If we don't see those come out, if they do come out, I should say, I think this Rite of War is going to become quite popular because they're fun. They're a fun unit. So, from a lore perspective, plenty of narrative-driven reasons to bring out this Rite of War. Most legions could pull this off, with a few, much like those I mentioned in the previous Rite of War, not being so keen on anti-grav platforms. Salamanders, they love their feet on the ground. As I said though, most legions have hundreds of jet bikes and land speeders just sitting around ready for use. I'd want to justify the mass use of this type of warfare and work that into the theme and hobby side of my army. Perhaps you're fighting on a world covered mostly in water, with lots of tiny islands, or maybe your battlefield that's covered in lava. These can be easily represented on the bases of your miniatures to bring a bit of flavour in and give a bit of justification to why you're taking these units. Or maybe your legion is battling against a high-speed alien race that needs jet bikes and land speeders to keep up. You could represent that by a whole bunch of battle damage or the trophies of the alien craft strapped to the hulls of your jet bike. Perhaps your legion has a highly specialised chapter full of recruits from a savage world where the locals ride flying reptilian beasts and they paint the jet bikes and land speeders with the patterns of these monsters. There's plenty of cool ideas to explore with this one. From a power perspective, this is where it falls down a little. So while the saying goes that most war games are won in the movement phase, that's both true and sometimes a trap for games of Horus Heresy. Faster doesn't always mean better, and especially with how the missions are written up. I've always found the shooting phase to be just a little more impactful. This force will be highly mobile, but that mobility doesn't come naturally with the survivability that it once did in the older edition. Jet bikes in particular just feel a bit underpowered at the moment, though they've also come down in points to match their new stat line. These zoomy lads are going to die to bolters if you don't buff them in some other way, so taking a whole bunch of them, it can get risky. Their firepower also feels a little weak compared to some other similarly priced options, and if we look at the Proteus land speeders as well, while they start cheap, they get really expensive points-wise if you put some decent weaponry on them, and their toughness of 5 just isn't going to do much to keep them on the table. With all of this in mind, I'm going to put this Rite of War squarely in the narrative bucket when it comes to its competitiveness on the table. The other two Rites of War, the Angel's Wrath and the Legion Recon Company, can really do work, but our Sky Hunter Phalanx is just a little weak when it comes to doing some serious damage on the table. In the end though, if you want to run a lot of bikes and speeders, the White Scars Rite of War Chagorian Brotherhood, with its access to outriders and outflanking infantry, it simply does it better. As long as you are happy with painting white, that is. So what Legion does this best? Now, White Scars are the obvious choice here. They've got a bunch of cavalry-type Legion units that work well within this Rite of War, and they're born to the saddle Warlord trait, gives all of your cavalry protection against dangerous terrain, which can be a serious hurt factor for this Rite of War. But as I said, you'd probably just choose the Chagorian Brotherhood Rite of War if you wanted to go White Scars. So what other legions play well into this army build? Choosing Dark Angels and taking advantage of the Ravenwing unit subtype to reroll Shroud damage mitigation is definitely a solid option here, and gives you a tasty lore boost as well. Ultramarines quite enjoyed this Rite of War. They get +1 to hit when units are working together to target the enemy, that's in shooting. Jetbike squads supported by land speeders fit this mechanic really nicely, and it makes their shooting very reliable. Although with the majority of shooting likely being heavy bolters coming out of your jet bikes, Imperial Fists are another obvious choice for this one. If you want to go down the combat path, and I think it could be a thing, World Eaters make for a really fun army packed full of jet bikes. They've got +1 attack, which is really helpful because jet bikes do not come naturally with many attacks. They get that on the charge, of course, and the ability to give all your jet bikes a chain axe as well is really cool. Land speeders can also now fight in combat too, so charging on in at breakneck speed, it might not actually be the worst option, and you might be a bit more protected in combat than you would have been from shooting. So that is the 3 Rites of War that we're going to look at today. We had the Legion Recon Company, we had Angel's Wrath, and then the Sky Hunter Phalanx. Thank you so much for watching. Let us know in the comments whether you're planning on building around any of these Rites of War and how you're going to go about it. Importantly, make sure to keep rolling those dice and getting hyped for Heresy.